Greetings from around the world. My name is Tom, and welcome to the Fetish Traveller. This podcast is all about us sitting down with key figureheads of fetish communities around Europe and the rest of the world. We're going to be learning more about their history, what's going on at this current point in time, and what the future could hold. So, sit back with a drink of your choice and enjoy the podcast. We are incredibly proud to have Leathermen Travel support us on this podcast journey. You're planning a future leathery trip? Don't worry, Leathermen Travel have got your back. Visit their website to learn more about leather and fetish events, clubs, and weekends happening around the globe. So we've reached episode 9, and we're going to be making our way over to Eastern Europe, and in particular over to Poland, where we'll be joined by Kross. Now, Kross is Mr. Rubber Poland 2023, and he's certainly got a lot to tell us about how the fetish scene started in the 1990s in Poland and how it's really evolved with the changing political climate of the LGBTQ plus community over there. I certainly learned a fair bit while speaking with him, and I'm certainly sure that you will do too. So, Kross, I am very, very pleased to finally have you on the Fetish Traveller podcast because I think it's coming up to maybe almost a year since we first met in person. Obviously, Pride season is almost upon us, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I first met you in the flesh maybe at London Pride last year.
Yeah, I think it was. Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor and it's a great pleasure. Yeah, I think we've met. I think it was Recon Pride Walk during London Pride. So yeah, obviously I've seen you online before, and yeah, it was a great pleasure to meet you in the flesh on that day. And then we've met many times ever since.
Yeah, there's like a European title holder kind of group chat and everything, and you can try and do your best to communicate which events you're going to. Now, the great thing about Kross and I is that we both live in the UK, which means that a lot of the events we go to, we don't even need to communicate the ones that we're going
Correct.
to. So we've met many, many times, obviously over in Cardiff. We've done the big circuit events that take place. So we've done a fair few events over the past
Good year.
year or so, and obviously we're fine at so obviously we're recording this mid-April, and coming up towards the end of April is the Warsaw Fetish Weekend, an event which it seems by year on year. Obviously, last year was really really great with how many people are advertising it. So I'm pretty sure that this year is going to be one to definitely remember. So we look forward to checking that out, and we're obviously going to be talking about that a little bit more. But for those who don't know, Kross is the current, albeit for just another week as we're recording this.
Yep.
Such sad times, Mr. Rubber Poland. And our
Yes.
first question is then, how have you found your year?
It went very quickly,
Mhm.
as you would imagine. I think that everything like that is just caught you out of surprise, really, before you even know it. And yeah, it was a very busy year, and the additional challenge was, me being in Bristol in the UK. So I wasn't able to be present locally all the time, even though I did my best to travel there as many times as possible. But when there is a challenge, there is opportunity, and I tried to use the opportunity as much as I could, and just find different ways to approach the community and achieve the goals that we've all had together.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trends, I don't know how. I don't think it really matters as long as you're representing whether it be an association, a country, a city, wherever, regardless of where you live, depending on, travel and everything in between. There are so many opportunities that you can meet people, whether it be online or all of these other events. There seems to be an event every single weekend, whether that be local or far. And obviously, you host your own podcast, which has been a great platform for you to talk about rubber in the fetish community. So you obviously mentioned that this is the first time that you're on the other side of the microphone.
That's correct. I'm still trying to familiarize myself with a different situation now, but yeah, so far so good.
Perfect. Happy days. Well, this will obviously be a great opportunity for us to talk about Poland, and we don't really have an agenda, but For me, I
Mm.
like to kind of start things off by talking about the history and where it starts off with. So almost like we're let's say we're in a library, we're in an archive. Cross. Let's talk about, because I'm really keen. I don't know much about the history of the Polish leather, rubber, and general fetish scene. So from your side, what do you know about how the scene started there?
Um, the formal beginnings, I think, go back to the early noughties, really. Naturally, you have to be looking at Poland from the perspective of completely different history than that of Western Europe. And Poland had quite turbulent history throughout 20th century. First with the Second World War, and then basically almost half of the century of communism. So there was a lot of struggle and many problems coming from that period. And then it was only after the fall of communism in the early 90s where things started slowly developing, and it really kind of like culminated in the early noughties. So, for example, 2004, I believe, was only the first time when we got first really proper fetish gay sex shop. So obviously you had different sex shops, but when you think about like proper fetish sex shop, it was the first one. It's called Reform, and it's running until this day.
Wow.
And it was highly supporting the community throughout all those years. And they stock all the things like apart from toys, they had leather, they had rubber, all different kind of stuff that other sex shops didn't have. And at the end of the 90s, and then beginning into the noughties, Warsaw saw opening of several different clubs, which unfortunately don't exist anymore. But they were kind of like all opening, starting their activity around that time.
Hmm.
And then, if we think about elections, like Mr. Lever elections or Mr. Rubber elections, this was the Mr. Lever Poland elections that were first. And the first title holder was elected, I believe, in 2011.
Hmm.
So as you can see, there is this, slow, progressive
Sure.
growth, so to speak. And then I think it wasn't until 2017 when there was first Mr. Rubber Poland elections as well. So, it just kind of like came a few years later.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's when it kind of like really started happening, at least when we think from the perspective of the public space, because what was happening in the bedrooms behind closed doors, it's a completely different matter. And I'm sure that communist times were also full of fun and lots of activities going on, but it was very repressive time, which unfortunately until this day remains to be kind of like a national hiccup in
Hmm.
terms of mentality, because of its oppressiveness, people kind of like got used to not really being open about their sexuality,
Yeah.
about their kinks. A lot of like there was a lot of cruising in public spaces, and then people were going home to play at homes. Being
Hmm.
out and open was very dangerous, because after all, it was a totalitarian oppressive state which hated gays terribly. I mean, many states, are not really friendly in terms of gay community or the queer community, but with the communist regime, it was especially difficult. So yeah, long story short, more or less, the beginnings are the noughties.
Because obviously we're living in a community of a general community. Basically, if you think of the queer community as the umbrella, we're like a little we're a little raindrop of it, basically. So that's even more difficult and takes even more time to be visible, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
my history of all things Poland, I remember when YouTube was really taking off in kind of the early, maybe mid 2010s. From my experience, you used to see so many documentaries of maybe one individual with his camera going around, whether it be the cities or some small towns around Poland, and just painting it as a really backwards place in terms of LGBTQ plus rights. So I do look forward to going there next week. I recognize I'm only there for a fetish weekend, so I'm not going to be able to speak to the masses and get some sort of survey about it. But your feedback of kind of the history, in particular when we're talking about LGBTQ plus rights, is very succinct of what other people have told me about Poland.
I absolutely love history of lots of different places, and for me, it's not only Warsaw, it's not only Poland, it's also where I live here in the UK. Whenever I could, I try to do lots of different research about different topics. As you might remember, we're talking about that there is a fetish archive at Bishopstone Institute, which I'm intending to visit. So
Mhm.
that will be quite very interesting. And going back to Poland, at this point, I need to mention that as part of Warsaw Fetish Weekend on Saturday, on the 27th of April, we are organizing Warsaw tour,
Uh-huh.
which I've offered actually to lead. Because myself, I'm originally from Warsaw. I spent there, most of my life, and I've done a great deal of research in terms of the history of fetisher and gay community in Warsaw itself. So I can't really wait, to be able to guide you around my city and to tell you all about it. But yeah, Poland. If I was to describe Poland, it's like the most confusing place on earth. Lots of contradictions. And when we talk about rights, when we talk about being backwards or whatnot, for example, when you think about homosexuality from the perspective of the law, um, homosexuality in Poland was decriminalized in 1932, before
Yeah.
the Second World War. And for example, in the UK, it wasn't until 1967. Even then, it wasn't full decriminalization. And fast forward to now. Now we are in the situation when Poland doesn't even have civil partnerships, while the UK, on the other hand, has marriages and the whole kind of like the whole full legal
Mhm.
spectrum of accepting the gay community. So you see like those differences, and kind of like, when did that happen? That it just changed so much.
Well,
And
hopefully that's something that we can talk about more than next weekend when you're guiding us through your city.
with pleasure. Yeah,
Oh,
there is a lot. There is a lot
brilliant.
interesting.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear, Cross. And if I mean, before we start to talk about what's currently happening in Poland and Warsaw in terms of the fetish scene, you mentioned kind of in the when in the 2000s when things really did start to kick off and galvanize. What particular spaces were that at the time? You obviously mentioned that it starts off in the bedroom, as a lot of aspects do, closeted. The time comes for an individual or a group of people to open up a space. From your experience and your research, what were those spaces?
So around mid 90s to like late 90s, first few clubs emerged. One of them was called Phantom.
Hmm.
That Yeah, it was opened in 1994, I believe, and lasted until 2017, so quite a long
Pretty
time.
good, yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't survive. But yeah, it was one of the um, you know, forerunners in terms of like creating a space that was a safe space in terms of having a sex club. There was also a sauna even in there, so it wasn't just like just a sauna or just a sex club or just a club. It was just trying to combine actually different
Yeah.
functions. And then there was a place called Wild Club.
Hmm.
Um, so it also went through different of transitions actually, because it started more as a general sex fetish safe space for all people regardless of sexuality or gender. It was like a little bit more leaning towards straights actually, but then kind of like it changed and it
Mm.
became more like a gay place. So and it was really specialized in terms of it catered for very specialized kings were specialized. I mean, they were, especially at that time, like they were very specific in terms of having spaces or events just for spanking or fisting, or
Yeah.
people were into leather, into rubber, into sneakers, into sports, and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, so I think that those two places were potentially the most known and the most important in terms of the fetish life.
Yeah.
And then you have all the array of different cafes and restaurants, in the
Hmm.
main central area,
Yeah.
along the royal roads that, well, also like everyone knew that they were frequented. The reason I've mentioned the challenges resulting from the communist times is that, I guess, unlike with the Western Europe, you couldn't just, many places for a long time weren't really advertised, or it wasn't that obvious where you could go. So a lot
Hmm.
of that was just word of mouth, and people quite often were also actually meeting, for example, at those cafes and those restaurants.
Hmm.
And then in the 90s, when those places started opening, they were just going there as well. But before that, it was, obviously they would have to be looking for different other options,
Yeah.
places to find fun and entertainment.
Uh-huh. Yeah, interesting. And at the time when you said these kind of 2 or 3 fetish friendly kind of clubs and saunas opened up, did you mention that Royal Road? Is
Yeah.
that kind of even in the 90s and even now, is that where predominantly a lot of the queer friendly and gay bars are now?
There never been really a centralized space in Warsaw. The thing about Warsaw is that, um, I would say, if you think about, like, cities would either have everything like centralized that is very
Mm,
close within walking distance, or you would have cities where lots of things are just actually dispersed in different areas. So even Warsaw, being capital of Poland, is, it's a reasonable big city. It's like million point seven 1.7 million
yeah.
inhabitants essentially. Um, so yeah, so reasonable size in terms of capital city, but yeah, it never been like really grouped in one particular place.
Mhm.
So the whole Royal Road I've mentioned was mostly like, there was some, like, there might be one club and one restaurant or one cafe, and then in another area there was another club and
Yeah.
another restaurant. So actually, me trying to think about, that tour I'm going to lead, it continues to be quite challenging, because I would like to have a nice walk with all you folks, but then I also don't want to kill any of you by just, walking,
Walking
for half
everywhere.
of the day, because I would really like to take you everywhere and talk about so many stories, but it would really require substantial walks, between different points. So I really have to think about in a clever way how to do it. But yeah,
It almost sounds like we need to try and do that in London because that is so dispersed in terms of kind of real gay heritage places like Soho, Southwest London, like Clapham area, and then you've got the East Londons as
yeah.
well. Can't
And then you have
imagine.
Vauxhall, so
Yeah.
it's well, yeah. Also, so it's very similar. It's just
Mhm.
exactly like that.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to travel a bit, but it's never too bad. If you really want. Then,
We'll get our walking boots ready then. Perfect. So let's talk about now in terms of where to go to it. And I guess we can start off with the fetish weekend coming up towards the end of April, where we'll get a good idea of where we can go to. So if you look at the agenda for the weekend, then where are the main places where a Leatherman, Rubber Boy, Gim, whoever would want to go to
mm.
in Warsaw in particular?
We will start the weekend on Thursday. Whoever is gonna be in Warsaw already on that day. There is a place that's been on the game map of Warsaw for many, many years now. It's called Lodi Dodi.
Mhm.
Obviously, we'll signpost people to websites and other channels to be able to look up all those places, because I can be telling lots of different names now, but sometimes it might be difficult to actually write it down. How do you things like that? But that one place is called Lodi Dodi. It's kind of like a bar place.
Mhm.
It's kind of like it's smaller, but it has 2 levels and has a small dark room downstairs. So we just basically want to kick off the weekend by having like welcome drinks over there. And,
Mhm.
if you want to wear fetish, we are more than welcome.
Mhm.
Naturally, Warsaw being slightly different than Western Europe, even though it's kind of like still the most progressive city in Poland.
Mm.
I would still be a little bit cautious maybe when wearing something more daring, in terms of, because if you're just gonna wear leather, that's fine. But if you
Yeah,
wear leather and with your bummer outside, then
sure.
that draw some interest. But you should be basically safe,
Mm.
because yeah, like Warsaw really has a very progressive, cool mindset. Um, so we want to do that on Thursday. We want to have that drinks. Then on Friday we'll have the dinner organized by Polish Leather Uniform Group.
Hmm.
Traditionally leather dinner, but naturally all Fetish is welcome
Yep.
and everyone welcome. Basically, there is no dress code. And then yeah, the Friday and Saturday evenings we will have the main events at Institute Bar,
Hmm.
where we're gonna have elections of both Mr. Rubber Poland and Mr. Leatherman Poland.
Hmm.
Some possible further activities on Saturday throughout the day, about which we will keep you posted online as they get confirmed. And Sunday, we plan to organize the little farewell brunch and also location to be announced. So that's roughly the plan. The main venue is Institute Bar, which is quite a new spot on Warsaw's map. I believe it was opened like mid 2022.
Yeah, I was talking to Andy, so last year's Mr. Leather Europe, and he mentioned when he went there in 2023, he kind of said it still felt really, really new, but he really enjoyed it. He mentioned in terms of the gear that they've got that you can use, there seems to be this kind of sack that everybody talks about, and I don't know if it's still there, this kind of leathery or materialistic sack in which in which you can just put somebody in and just leave them hanging.
Might be, like it's a very well equipped club, and yeah, like has great vast spaces in terms of the play areas as well, because the club itself is on the ground floor, and then you can go into the play spaces that are on the ground floor and in the basement.
Mhm.
And yeah, it has some very interesting things installed. Like once I discovered, to my utter surprise, that for example, when you have the bar section, so
Uh-huh.
when you actually behind the bar, when you have all the bottles with liquor and
Mhm.
whatnot, there is a little space which looks like a shower.
Okay.
And I was like, what the hell is this? So I asked the bartender, like, is it just a decoration, or is it just a work in shower, or what is it? And then he told me, yeah, it is actually work in shower, because when they have like, I don't know, any naked dancing shows of different guys, they quite often would just turn the shower on, and so yeah, like why not, right? So they really have creative approach, and the guy who is running that place is, he's a lovely guy, and he ran one of the saunas called Heaven from, I believe, like 2010.
Mhm.
So for a number of years now, so pretty established, on the Warsaw scene. So yeah, really great place with great potential. And, I keep saying that, currently I think that in terms of Warsaw, it's the only fetish place we have. Um,
Okay.
and it is very important to make sure that we look after it.
Mm.
Because, this is our place for the community. And as you may perfectly know, we are in a difficult situation now when there is, more and more hostility towards any queer or gay people, and doesn't matter if it's
Mm.
kinksters or not kinksters, just basically being difficult and complicated. And the same is in case of authorities, councils, all stuff like that.
Mhm.
uh, I'm sure we both know that London saw a number of closures in the last
Yeah.
few years of quite cult places, some of them transformed. So
Mm.
yeah, it's definitely quite something that's worth to be to be looking after. So, and yeah, I can't wait also to welcome you there.
Yeah, from my side, I'm really looking forward to it, Cross. I mean, in London, it's interesting because I guess at the time there were so many places to go to, and then obviously all of the apps started to come up in the 2000s, and then we just assumed we, as in for me, I was still a teenager probably at that time, but people have told me that they just disrespected it, and they obviously started to have fun at home privately and everything, and they kind of thought that everything would be running as usual. And now obviously there is more emphasis to attend non-for-profit nights, for-profit nights, events and spaces. But to your point, it's a little bit different in Warsaw in that you've got one space in which clearly you've kind of got a leather uniform group, you've got a rubber group. I'm not too sure what other groups there are. We can talk about that as well, in which
Mm,
that they've got a real opportunity to hone in on one space that clearly, by the sounds of this, does many different types of nights, whether it be these dance party nights or specific fetish or real hard kink nights. So it's we would hope, and I'd love to speak to people next weekend about it. Um, about how obviously how the bar's doing and what they plan to do to your point, yeah, make it more welcoming and inclusive, definitely.
mm. Yeah, I think that in terms of that place, it's a bit similar how the Eagle in Manchester runs, as
Mm,
also they have lots of different parties catering for different communities. And with institutes, yes, there are leather events, rubber events, Warsaw Fetish meetings, as they are called,
mm,
organized by both Polish leather uniform groups, so Plug, and the Polish Latex Assembly Play, which I co-created throughout my title year with the Polish rubber community, which was really great achievement that what made me really happy.
yeah.
And there are other events at that place. There is Warsaw Pubs Meet. There are also sneaker nights that are organized together with Asox, which is great Polish sneakers brands, and
Hmm.
also it's a brand, but it's also supporting and making sure that the community is looked after as well. Which I think that's it is important to have this good relationship between business and communities as well, supporting each other. So yeah, lots of different events, like horse fairs events proved
Oh
apparently
yeah.
popular as well. I mean, the one at Darklands was very popular, but it seems they are popular everywhere these days. So it seems like that's the case with Institute as well. But yeah, like, look, one thing that is important and this is what I was trying to understand myself for like a really long time, because I think that we think about you know people who are into fetish, we think about kinksters, but at the end of the day, we are all people with our own baggages,
Mm,
problems, interests, feelings, needs, emotions, and so on and so forth. So when I'm trying to understand that, I'm always trying to look at Kingsters from the perspective just basically of human beings with all that. Um, and I think that one of the big differences between Eastern Europe communities and Western Europe communities is that because of that really difficult period of 50 years of communism, people came from that period with a sense that they can't really trust each other much because in that times you never knew who worked for secret police, so you could just be
yeah.
told that they may just basically say that this and that person does this and that, so we all always had to be very careful and had limited trust and not really be open with stuff and out and about. And kind of like, I think this is what I meant by that hiccup at the beginning of the conversations, because
Mm,
like, it seems like it still follows
yeah.
people. Unfortunately, so people are a bit conscious, like, they would not go out and enjoy themselves in public spaces as eagerly as maybe Western communities would. So that changes.
Hmm. Obviously, when it was a time in which people couldn't trust each other, whatever decade that looked like, and then you came up to the point where you've basically got to take we it's almost to the point now, Cross, where it's like we need to be taking care of our own more than anything, really.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how you mentioned about not trusting each other in bars and spaces, because it could be that a cop or a policeman is dressed up in the same gear. We used to have there'll be tales of kind of leather friendly bars in the 70s and 80s in London. Even after it was decriminalized to be gay, the police would still dress up in biker gear, leather, biker uniform gear. They come into these old bars in kind of Earl's Court area, for example. They would obviously start to have fun in the venue or around the corner, basically from the pub, and they would prosecute them. They would arrest them. So we had similar things, and I'm sure that's very, regardless whether that be in West Europe or East Europe, there's probably a time where many queer people were very much objectified like that. So um it's really interesting. And I guess that's the thing where you've got people coming to these venues now, their parents or obviously elders would have gone through something similar, and probably mention that to them if they have come out to them, for example.
Mm. Yeah, and you might also think that, it might be, for example, just, a matter of a generation, but it's kind of like it seems that because unfortunately with those things, sometimes the mentality, whether you like it or not, it's sometimes even subconsciously carried over, even. So, the younger generations, our generations, sometimes they just unconsciously continue like similar patterns in terms of the behaviors or fears or whatnot. So
Hmm.
yeah, so it's quite tricky because two different examples maybe, which hopefully you'll find interesting. Like at the end of 80s, I believe it was 1985.
Okay.
So there was so-called Operation Hyacinth. Yeah, it was 1985. So Operation Hyacinth was when communist authorities started catching gays
Hmm.
and creating files for them, so-called pink files. Apparently, they've created like 11,000 of them.
My God.
No one knows what happened to them. Some people claim that they were destroyed once the communism ended, because the authorities wanted maybe, I don't know, to just destroy all the traces or whatnot. But no one really knows. It never been concluded. People were not apologized for what happened or,
Mm.
or whatnot. But, it was a lot of trauma. And then communism ended. You might think, nah, like this is the thing of the past. It's like it's
Sure.
modern days now. It's like 2004, Poland joined European Union. There is like the great prosperity, entering
Yeah.
democracy and stuff like that, opening to the West and things like that. But where I lived in Warsaw, it was before I moved to Bristol. I lived next to Savior Square. I guess that's how you could translate the name of the square.
Mm.
So in 2012, they erected the installation of a rainbow. Rainbow was like the structure was made of steel and was covered with like 20,000 artificial flowers.
Mm.
And it lasted, I think, like 3 years. And it was potentially set on fire by right wing activists like 7 times. And it's just basically the installation became almost like very sad and brutal live performance that's been going on for 3 years and was full of discussions in the media about the freedom, about the gay movement, and so on and so forth. So you might have thought that all those things are gone and it's all good now, but then you could see the burnt steel structure of the rainbow and you
Mm.
just were realizing that something is not right. So
Quite moving. So you've got two examples. One, a real kind of institutionalized problem that happened in the 90s, did you say, with the pink
it was
uh,
late 80s, just before the fall of communism.
in the late 80s, something like that, which you could only make into a documentary, for example, or some sort of film documentary
There
by the
is there is funny you should say that because actually
okay.
there is a film on Netflix made by yeah, it was made by Polish
Yeah.
creators, but yeah, just distributed on Netflix. So if you go on Netflix and search for Operation Hyacinth, then you will find the film.
Oh,
It's
well,
quite
there you
highly
go.
recommended.
That is an action plan then for people to definitely take a look at, because best believe I'm going to do that definitely before next
Highly
weekend.
recommended.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got another example in which, in reality, that's still happening in terms of people fighting against our rights and visibility in one way, shape, or another. But that does sound like quite a brutal in person example, especially somewhere which was so close to where you were brought up, in particular.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was quite something to be witnessing that, myself in person, what was going on, just, literally on, almost like on the other side of the road.
Mm.
And yeah, but I like to try to think positively. There is a lot of activism in Poland nowadays, which is very nice to see. And actually, I've read somewhere that current activists in Warsaw are doing their best to bring that rainbow back in the same place this year
Cool.
for World Pride in June. So fingers crossed they succeed. But even if not, chapeau bas for even trying to do something positive in a public space, because Poland definitely needs more and more positive signs of
Yeah.
affirmation of everyone and life in general, I would say.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
hopefully
and
change.
and hopefully next weekend when we're pottering about on either your walking tour or on the way to a dinner venue, we do get some people turn their heads and hopefully more in a positive way. Really, I mean, I remember when I was talking to a few people about the Fetish weekend last year, I was so surprised to see to positively surprised to see many people travel over actually and come along and support it, and clearly that's the case this year. We've got ourselves Andreas, who was only elected as Mr. Leather Berlin a few weeks ago, instantly kind of said, "Okay, I'm gonna come over to help out, support
Yeah,
people, be visible." And that it seemed to me that Lukasz, obviously Mr. Leather Berlin a couple of years ago, was really quite um alongside you yourself quite influential behind raising the awareness of the fetish groups and Warsaw and Poland in general for people to come over. I remember Easter Berlin last year, him and Baja organized at New Action some sort, I can't remember what they called it, almost like a Polish social or like a Polish general meeting in New Action, and that kind of got my ears pricked
mm,
up and thought, okay, this is quite interesting. Learn a bit more about it. The lovely shots that were given to us were great and everything, but it certainly got my alarm bells ringing about. And then getting to know you as well, taught me a lot about checking out Poland. So really am looking forward to it. Where do you a quick question, where do you kind of see the future of the future of fetish? That's quite a nice that's
your
quite a
fetish.
nice thing to say, really. Where do you see kind of the future of fetish with Poland and Warsaw in particular?
Well, I guess that any thoughts start a little bit of reflection on my own title year.
Mm,
And yeah, I just wanted to mention that whatever I was trying to do throughout that year, I was trying to have the community at the heart of it, even though I'm not based there permanently to support them. But that's the reason why I decided to focus on the podcast so much, because I thought
mm,
that if I can't travel there that often, then at least I can use the online opportunities that we have to kind of like connect with that community through those podcasts and spread different important messages.
mm,
And then I've realized that let's maybe try to create the Polish rubber group, because there never really been any formalized Polish rubber group before, and that's so great interests, as I said, causing great happiness, because we have um, there are many people from the Polish rubber community that were the title holders before, and then for whatever reasons they just decided to step aside for a little while, and now they decided to come back, which is great to see. And that includes Przemek, Mr. Rubber Poland 2019. That includes Michał, Mr. Rubber Poland 2017, who then also went to Chicago and won Mr. International Rubber title, which was absolutely great.
no. Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't know this. If I get to
yeah.
know him next weekend, then that will be great. I mean, that's a great opportunity to obviously put Poland on the map. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely right. And this is also like thought, okay, I'm not in Warsaw, I'm here in Bristol.
Mm.
UK is naturally huge scene in terms of the fetish scene in itself, and also having an impact in Europe naturally, and opportunity to meet different people. I just thought that I'll just try to make as many friendships, because I just like to connect with people throughout from different places, and I
Mm.
just thought that, look, even I might be living in Bristol, but Poland and Warsaw, the city I'm coming from, it's still dear and near my heart. So I care about its future. So I thought, yeah, this is maybe a great opportunity to just make those connections tighter,
Hmm.
because I think that we really need to stick together. And yeah, I'm just, talking about all those things, exactly thinking about the future. And I'm really happy that, we have all those wonderful guests coming to Warsaw this year, including yourself, that decided to, sacrifice the time and money to do that, because we all know that, traveling these days is quite expensive. And, the same goes for time. So if you decide to do that, then, that's really much appreciated. And yeah, when I'm thinking about the future, I'm thinking really from the perspective of bringing the community back at the heart of everything, and making sure that we have a common goal, a common purpose. Because while it is important to, think about ourselves as individuals and grow and develop and so on and so forth, I think that sometimes things go just a bit awry if we tend to go too much individualist, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that we, especially in those more challenging times, really need to have to look out for each other. And hence the example of the rubber group that was created. That's why I'm so happy that it was possible to happen. The example of Plug. So it was very good to see that created. And like you've asked before about actually how the leather community looked like in Poland before. So I really actually didn't manage to talk about that in the end. So I may just mention a little bit
Yeah,
now
of course.
that we had one society that existed for a number of years, and as you say, became part of ECMC
Hmm.
clubs. And then it got disbanded, and a new one was formed, which was currently the Plug. The
Hmm.
Plug. So yeah, like phoenix from the ashes. Those things tend to change, which
Yeah.
is fine. This is just how those things sometimes go. But at the end of the day, if we don't forget to do stuff for the wider community, I think everything is gonna be good. Because the problems normally starts when we just have you know individual interests only.
Yeah.
So let me just put it that way.
Yeah, it's always that concept of being stronger together. And I remember
Yeah.
the a lot of the when I was doing research on title holders, I remember at the time, maybe 2016, 2017, a real group of European title holders stuck to that kind of statement, stronger together. And yeah, to your point, it does reinforce associations such as ECMC. It could represent associations such as the leather and the rubber groups in Poland sticking together, collaborating, getting along more than anything. It's real simple things. If you're decent human beings with a similar common interest or goal, such as being into fetish, then you should probably make it, a worthwhile idea for you guys to get along more than anything. And yeah, I remember. I mean, without going political and talking about all things Brexit, that's probably the best example of being more individualistic. And from our side of the fetish scene in UK, people said that when Brexit happened, there was a real kind of disband of Europe in terms of the fetish scene, and people still ask me that question actually last year and even this year, thinking, oh, I felt less inclined to visit parts of the UK because of what happened in 2016 actually, and
Mm,
I thought, oh my God, that just showcases that obviously real big catastrophic things that happen
mm,
in the normal world from a political standpoint do have an
yeah.
effect on these sub communities.
Yeah, and many Europeans already residing in the UK, including myself, also had those thoughts
Mm,
every now and then. Like, so what is my place now here? Like, am I
yeah,
really wanted, or am I not wanted? At the end of the day, I knew that obviously I am wanted, because I have friends, I have fetish community, and we know that we all care about each other. So, it's
mm,
it's more complex than it seems. But um yeah, like, it's very important to try to actually try to be finding common denominator, in terms of like different communities. And it's not really worth to be divided, and the more divided we are, the more, kind of like our opponents gain, so to speak. And it even reminds me, because I've done a little bit of research in terms of when the rubber pride flag came from.
Mm.
And apparently, one of its creators, Peter Tullis, apparently he said that when he was talking about his process of creating the rubber pride flag, he said something like that: we, the gay people, especially the fetish community, we are just constantly under attack of people who just don't want us to exist.
Yeah.
And we have to just basically come together to be able to face the challenges, and kind of like fight together. And that rubber pride flag that was created was almost a proposition, a symbol of this, symbolical, metaphorical,
Mm.
uniting symbol that this is us as a community, as often happens with different flags, especially pride flags.
Yeah.
I'm sure that with the leather flag, potentially it wasn't much different, really.
Yeah, it was a dear friend of mine called Tobias, originally from Atlanta. He's gonna love this because he might hear this. He's lived in Atlanta, but he kind of spends a lot of his time now in London. In his speech in IML 10 years ago, his first few words is "I am black, but I'm also white and blue and red," and
Oh,
that was really to some extent why Tony de Blas created the flag just over 50 years ago, you know.
mm,
So it's all a similar thing, and I know we're talking more about flags and we're talking a bit about politics, but going back to the original premise of our podcast here, that I think that key message of staying stronger together
yes.
exists really, because of people kind of trying to tear us down on the outer sides of the community, people who not only don't understand, but don't want to understand, and therefore don't see a reason for us to be doing these things in and out of the bedroom. Um, with all of that happening on the outside world, why should we be, being individualistic and on the inside of the community more than anything?
Yeah, totally that. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So without even going more political or anything like that, it's probably best to take a breather, really. So, oh my
Yes.
God, to cut across, we've really talked about a lot, and I've kind of got my to-do list here, love, in terms of areas to talk about. But I think we've hit the nail on the head with pretty much everything. Obviously,
Hopefully, yes.
conscious of time for the lovely audiences here. Is there any other kind of final comments in terms of Poland and Warsaw or rubber that you'd like to like to share?
I would only invite, for exploration. Poland has a lot to offer, and despite despite me moving to the UK, I moved to the UK for reasons completely different than just trying to abandon
Yeah,
Poland because I didn't. Um, yeah, I would definitely encourage to visit yourself, see with your own eyes. I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of fun and lots of good memories. And I would just say that it's important to remember to stay out in the open public space, hang out with people, meet people, be together. Don't get overwhelmed or overtaken by the online world, even though it can be very useful and very good for many reasons, because that's one of the ways how even my title year was facilitated. If it
yeah.
wasn't online, then I couldn't I couldn't do most of the stuff. So obviously online has its own advantages, but I can't stress enough how important it is not to forget that there is life out there, and that's if we're gonna keep going out and meeting each other and hanging out with each other, I believe that everything's gonna be all right.
Perfect. Happy days. Couldn't have said it any better, to be honest. Cross love. Totally. Well, Cross, seriously, buddy, from the bottom of my heart, look forward to seeing you next weekend. You know, not only for your step down, a step aside, but look forward to obviously you teaching us a little bit more about Warsaw and Poland has to offer. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. And yeah,
Very much.
enjoy your evening as we're speaking.
Thank you very much, and Johan, can't wait to see you.